Thanks, Sam. Welcome and a very good day to all of you. I'm Ravi Reddy. I'm one of the lead premier support specialists here at BMC, and I am with BMC for over 10 years now, based out from India. Thank you for joining me on this webinar today, which is on the advanced use cases with Helix dashboards. Our agenda for today is fairly small. We'll start with the user sync in Helix dashboards more briefly. We'll cover a few of the functions that are available in Helix dashboards that would help you to develop a complex dashboard. We'll also touch base on the features and functionalities in Helix dashboards that would really help in enhancing the viewability of the dashboards that you've built. And we'll summarize. So our first topic for today is user sync in Helix dashboards. We do have two sections associated to this. One is covering what is available out of the box. Number two being how could you tailor it according to your needs. So out of the box, we do have four predefined groups, starting with ITSM Insight Administrator, Incident Correlation User, a Licensed User, and Problem Identification User. So all these groups have an associated qualifications to it. The basic ones being the licensed user, where it checks if the user have a fixed or floating or bundled license types. So coming to the section 2 is how could you tailor it according to your needs. So for this, all you'll have to do is create your own record or group in the form named ER System Logical User Grouping. You'll have to define a group name which is more suitable and the qualification that you wish the users to be part of this group. So this would help in categorizing the existing users from the Helix portal or the dashboards. In continuity, if you wish to have this group more updated in real time, you will have to do an additional step of creating a new record in the AI system webhook form to perform actions like any new user creation, any kind of updations to the record, merging and removing. So for this, all you'll have to do is capture the record GUID of the group that you've created under the AI system logical user grouping. And you will have to generate a new access key and secret key from the Helix portal. And with all these details in hand, you will have to create a new record under the AI system webhook, and you're good to go. Finally, the easiest part is assigning the permissions to the newly created groups versus individual user. Our next topic is the functions in Helix dashboards. We have string functions, we have date, aggregate, and the native database functions. Amongst the string functions, we could also use the nested functions, and the quite common example is the combination of substring and char index. And we also have an option to use the native database functions by defining them or registering them in the AI system. This helps us to achieve any complex use cases that you wish to build in the Helix dashboards. Moving on to our final topic of this webinar is the features and functionalities in Helix dashboards. I'm going to explain you about the data links that could be reused in a particular dashboard by creating a URL prefix variable. And I'll also showcase the reuse of the query output in a panel of a particular dashboard and create multiple visualizations based upon the output of this panel. And finally, touch base on the row and repeat feature, which is in match with the section and breaks in the reporting solutions. With that, let's move on to the demo. So I've logged into the Helix portal. This is my landing console. And let's quickly review the existing out-of-the-box groups. For that, I'll have to click on user access and followed by user groups. So these are my out-of-the-box groups coming in from ITSM, which are having a type external ITSM. And typically these gets created here once you enable the interop between your Converge platform and the ITOM. So let's also review how these groups looks like in Helix dashboards. So I moved on to the Helix dashboards console. This is my landing page, and I'll have to go to administration and teams. Of course, in Helix dashboards, the groups are termed as teams. So here I only see two groups and not the ones that I see in Helix portal. The reason being, these groups should have a minimum role of reporting viewer for them to be visible in Helix dashboards console. So let's go fix that. So for that, now I'll move on to the user access and select roles and permissions. I'll scroll down to find a reporting viewer, which is a minimum role. I'll select actions, edit, and from this window, I'll select the groups. So the groups that are missing were incident correlation, ITSM insight, and the problem identification user. Confirm, and I'm good to go. Now let's go back to our Helix dashboards. There is no need for re-login, and my groups should be coming up here. So far so good. Now we need to determine how are these groups being created, what's the logic behind, and how are the users being moved into these groups. So as I mentioned in my slide earlier, there is a group that is already predefined in the form called AR system logical user grouping, which have a qualification defined. So let's review the existing out-of-the-box groups here and find their qualifications. As you could see, the qualifications are defined for all these groups, and these are the very same groups that we have in Helix portal. So this is how the out-of-the-box user groups are defined. So now let's look into how to create your own user groups. For that, I'll move to ITSM in the form AR system logical user grouping. I'll create my own request. I'll have the user group name as manufacturing. Description can be same. Status in enabled. The form I'm relying on to validate the qualification is user. I'll have my qualification updated and verify the qualification. I've already pre-selected this group ID that belongs to the manufacturing. So let me save this record and come back to the Helix portal and see if my user group has been created or not. So groups, manufacturing, here we have. Now we will have to assign this manufacturing group a minimum permission for the reporting. So let's go to the roles and permissions and assign a permission for this group. So I'll come here, select manufacturing, confirm, and we should be good. Let's go back. So my custom group is available here. So the steps so far will help group the already synced users in Helix portal into the group that you have just created. But to make it more dynamic, that is to perform actions like creation, updation, and deletion, you'll have to move ahead and create a new entry in the AR webhook registration form, which is this. So we'll have to create a new request in here with all the details that are needed to be updated. So before we move ahead, let's create a new user. A request, a test user, test 3, and let's make him part of the manufacturing group. And let the license type be read. There's no problem there, and save this request. Now we'll go back to the group that we have just added a new user and try to list out the members of this group. So we could see that the newly created test user is present here. Now quickly validate whether if it is synced into the Helix portal or not. So I'm going to refresh this page. Go to user groups. Manufacturing is my custom group, and the new user is not synced yet. For the very reason, it would look for a new record in the AR system webhook registration form for the connection to establish between your ITSM and Helix portal. So let's create a new record in the AI system webhook registration form. For that, I'll click on new request, and these are the fields that I'll have to update before saving the request. For quick reference, let's look into one of the existing webhook registry to find what these details are, what has to be filled up. So form name is the form that you are using to fetch the data and for the validation. The field ID is the field where your qualifications should be validated. Custom JSON, this is the same syntax that one have to adhere to, and the only difference, only update you would change is a group ID. Group ID of the logical user group that you have created under the AI system logical user grouping form. So this one. So how do you get the record GUID? Is by generating a new report and capturing the record GUID from the report generated. I'm any which way is going to show you how to do that. Let's go back and continue further. So you could choose the events or the actions that this webhook should perform it for you. Create, update, and merge for this specific one. Followed by the qualification. This is the very same qualification that you have used in the AI system logical user grouping form. This is auto-generated. Status is by default enabled. You could select send unchanged fields. And moving further, we have callback URL, which is nothing but your Helix portal URL. Of course, you could copy and reuse the same callback URL also in your custom webhook entries. Authentication type has to be of IMS, where IMS stands for Identity Management Service. Access key and access secret key are something that you'll have to generate from Helix portal, which again, I'm going to show it to you how to do it. The tenant ID should be updated. Tenant ID can be found from the Helix portal. And rest of all the values can be reused from an existing webhook registry. And of course, you could update the description of the newly created webhook record. Now let me show you how to fetch the group ID from the AI system logical user grouping form. So here is my manufacturing group that I've just created. You'll have to click on report. I've already pre-created a report. I'll run this report, and here I get my record GUID. I shall save this for my future references to update the registry form. Once I've captured the record GUID, let's move further to generate the access key and the secret key. For that, I'll move on to the Helix portal, go back to the main page, and click on user access. And here you have users and keys. I'll click on access keys and click on add key. Here I'll give the key name as webinar, and the key type would remain as access key, and I'll select the key expiry as 30 days. You could also select never expire or any custom value that suits, and confirm. So my access key has been added. I'll click on copy key details and save it for my future reference. So these key details would typically start with the access key and followed by the secret key, and finally the tenant ID. Now that I have these details, let's go back to the AI system webhook registration form and start updating these values. So my form name is user, the field ID is 101. The events I would like this webhook to perform are create, update, and merge. I've already created the custom JSON. Let me copy paste. The only difference being the group ID that I've captured from the AI system logical user grouping form. The qualification would also remain the same as I've defined in the group, which is this. Status is enabled. You could select send unchanged fields. The callback URL would be typically your the Helix portal URL, which you could refer from any of the existing webhook entries. So let's copy paste from an existing one. And authentication type should be of IMS, where IMS stands for Identity Management Service. So here we'll have to update the access key. That's my access key. And that's my secret key. And that's the tenant ID. The rest of all the details can be very well reused from an existing one. So let's reuse that. And you could give it a name. I would say manufacturing. Update. And I shall save this request. Let's now perform a new search and see if our new entry is being created successfully or not. So we do have user, manufacturing, update, and these are details. So let's now go back to the Helix portal and validate if the user that we have created, the test user, is being synced under the manufacturing group or not. Edit. Yes, we have 10 assigned users, amongst which there is a test user. Please note that this user have a read license type. So this user has to log in order for the record to be created. So now let's delete this user and validate if the deletion is happening or not. For that, I'll go to the user form, new search, test. This is my user. I shall delete it. It has a read license. The permission is manufacturing group. Delete it. Let's now go back to the Helix portal and check the manufacturing group. Yes. So the user test has been deleted successfully. So this is how you create your own user groups to have more control and granularity in assigning the permissions. Let's assign a couple of application permissions and the dashboard permissions to the newly created group manufacturing. So let's go to the roles and permissions and search for reporting editor. Edit. Now select the groups and now assign the manufacturing group with reporting editor permissions. Confirm. So now all the users who belongs to manufacturing group would have by default the reporting editor permissions. Now let's see how we can take an advantage of these groups in Helix dashboards. I've logged into Helix dashboards. I'll click on dashboards, go to one of the folders, permissions, and here I have an option to assign any kind of permission to a group instead of a user. Here is a manufacturing group that we have created, and I can make sure anyone who belongs to this group can just view this configuration management folder or edit or be an admin. So for now I'll save it as view and save. This is how you could control the accessibility in bulk way by having groups created of your own choice as per your requirement. And that concludes our first topic on user sync in Helix dashboards. So our next topic is the functions in Helix dashboards. I've already pre-created a dashboard for this use case, and I have different panels for string, date, and aggregate functions, which also includes the native database functions. Before I deep dive into these functions and their syntaxes, let me show you how do you define your own native database DB function. For that, I'll move on to the ITSM, applications flyout, AR system administration, and AR system JDBC, generic DB functions. So this is the form where you define the native database functions as per your requirement. I'll perform a search to see what are the out-of-the-box ones, along with the custom ones that might have been defined. Right. So these are out-of-the-box functions along with native database functions like split underscore part. So these are predefined here. And in case you wish to add any further native database functions respective to the database type, you could come here and create your own record. Typically, this includes a function name followed by the type of database that you're developing this function on or creating this function on, and what's the return type and what are the arguments and number of arguments and the argument types. So once you define it here, you could go back and refer to those DB functions via a particular syntax, which I'm going to show to you in a while. Let's start with the function string. Let me edit this panel, scroll down, and my first function is char index, where the arguments are the first one being the character that it has to search for. The next is the field itself, where it has to search the characters for. The third argument is a position, where it has to start the scanning from. As you can see, the first output is 20 because it has found the S after 20 characters, where space is also considered to be a character. And there is a variance in numbers because it has found the letter S at different positions amongst these descriptions. Now let's discuss the substring. Here my first argument is the field itself, followed by the start position and the end position, where 0 is considered to be my first letter and 2 is my last letter to fetch a substring from a description. So 0, 1, 2 is 3 characters. So I've managed to fetch the 3 characters from the description field. Moving on to the length. Length determines the total number of positions in the description field. So as you can see, it will give you the total number of positions count. Now, having all these 3 functions, we could derive a dynamic substring to be able to fetch the data on the go. So for this, my main function remains substring, and my first argument is a field in question. For the starting position, it is determined with the help of my char index. Whenever it finds a letter S, start fetching the string from that position. So my first argument is filled there with a char index, and my next argument is the length, where it determines the complete length of the description field, and the same is replaced as my end character, the end of the string, where you'll have to fetch the information from. So this helps me to make this substring very dynamic and to be able to fetch the information. Let me show you how the data looks. So this is my dynamic substring column, where I'm telling it, start from yes is my starting position. So it starts almost at the end and fetch everything after yes. So it has fetched only T because we just left with a letter T there. And same goes for the next rows, where it fetches the data after yes, which is to Florida FPPN, and it just fetches all the data until the end of the description, because we have passed the argument, which is the dynamic, as the last letter or a character. The next one is string convert. This is a function that you could use to convert any of the clock fields into a varchar. Going further, we do have dbfn functions listed, but before I touch that, let me explain the difference between the dbfn and the normal functions. So here you could see there are two functions. One is lower without any dbfn appended. One is appended with a dbfn. The only difference these both would work in this case is lower is something that is already incompatible with the underlying ARJDBC. However, when you talk about the split part, this is a proper native database function which is not coded yet in the underlying ARJDBC. And in order for us to use this function, you will have to create a new record in the ARJDBC dbfn function form that I've just shown to make it compatible and get it working. So in this case, both the syntaxes are right. However, in this case, you will have to use dbfn. Now, trying to understand the split part function, it basically helps you to split the text amongst a string or a date and represent them as individual columns. Let me show you how. So these are my columns that I've used with the help of split part function. So here in split part, the first argument is the fielding position. The next argument is the delimiter. Where it finds hyphen, it has to split. The third argument is a position, after which the text has to be split. So in this case, for my first split part function for C7 column name, I've asked it to delimit after hyphen, which is BPN hyphen North America EST. So it has split the text into a new column, leaving the rest of the text, if in case that exists, and just places this text as one column. And same goes with the next row as well, where it finds hyphen after VPN web. So it fetches everything after server web and stops where it finds another delimiter. And that just proceeds. And what do we do for the next delimiter's text is where we have come up with the next split part function where it determines the delimiter hyphen, but then this time it has to start from position 3 after the delimiter. So that's termed as C8 column, and so on and so forth. You could split it according to your needs. Of course, this could also fits well in your date columns, where you could split the year, month, and date as per your requirements. That finishes the functions for the string. Let's go back and look into the date functions. So the date functions are very straightforward. Let me edit and go to the SQL. So here I picked up the submit date from my HPD help desk, which is for the incident management. And I could fetch the time field. I could fetch the month number with the syntax. I could have the month name with the date name function, having the argument passed as I can have the quarter, in which we are in, the year number with the help of year function, and we could also determine the difference between two dates. In this case, it's the submit date and the current date to find the age. And there is also possibility to create a bit of complex requirement where I'm using the substring in combination with concatenation with the year, where I could have both month and year together. Here I've used substring to fetch the first 3 letters of the month name. So this is my substring. The first argument is month, and I'm fetching it. I'm trimming it with first three characters, where 0 is my start position, 2 is my end position. So in total 3. And hyphen is the character that I would like to place between the month and year. And I'm doing a concatenation with year. Now I have the output as month hyphen year. That's pretty much it with the date functions. The final part is the aggregate functions. Let me edit, scroll down, and here I'm using the count on the incident number to find the total number of incident for a specific group, and I have a sum used to find all the open incidents where I could use a case when statement and apply an aggregation to it. So I'm able to find the total number of open incidents. You could also find the average of the case resolution, where it finds the difference between the submit date and the resolve date. So you could have the sum of total group transfers, maximum of individual transfers, a minimum of individual transfers, and average of total transfers. That's pretty much it from the aggregate functions standpoint. And that concludes our topic on the functions in Helix dashboards. Moving on with our final topic in this webinar is the features and functionalities in Helix dashboards. Let me open a pre-created report for this in the interest of time. And here are my 3 panels for this dashboard, where the first 2 panels have a links for drill through to the child reports, and the final panel is for the cross launch to your Smart IT application. Let me edit the first panel and review the existing data link configurations. And let me edit this, copy until the dashboard URL, go to the variables now, create a new variable, have it as a constant type, name it as URL prefix, and rest of all the things can be ignored. You'll have to update the value with your dashboard's URL. Apply, save dashboard, save. Come back to the panel, go back to the same data link configuration, edit, and replace the dashboard. Take it out and press Ctrl Alt space on your keyboard and select URL prefix. You will have to remove the colon query param, and you're good to go. Save, apply, and you could quickly test if it is working. So here is I. So it has taken me to the child report along with filtering out the data. Let me close this out and do the same for the next panel. I can now reuse the existing variable. So I'll remove until dashboards, Control Alt space, select URL prefix and remove the query param. You're good to go. Apply. Now you could do the same thing for the instant details panel as well, where this has the cross launch to your Smart IT. Let's quickly do that as well. So this is my configuration for the data links. Here I have the URL for the Smart IT. Either I wanted it to be Smart IT or AR system. That's up to me to configure. So I'll copy this, cancel, discard, go to variable section, new variable, constant. This time a different name because it doesn't contain the same name. Prefix app, save it, apply, save dashboard, save, go back to the panel and replace the configuration of the data links with this newly created variable. So it was until this. I Control Alt Space, URL app prefix, remove query params, and you're good. Apply. Let's quickly test 4656. It should open this in the Smart Rate application, the same ticket that you have clicked on. Good, 4656. So this is mainly helpful if you migrate these dashboards from one environment to the other. There is only one place that you'll have to update this, and all the links will be taken care in the panels. So this is the only place you need to update in case of any changes that are needed. Let's go back to the home page. Now let's review how to reuse a query output in panels. And for that, I'll use an existing out-of-the-box dashboard, instant details, drill through. Before I make any changes, let me save it with a different name. Call it as webinar. Save. So this is my panel with a tabular data, and I would reuse the same information to create multiple visualizations as per my needs. Let's start doing it. I'll click on Add Visualization. This time, instead of BMC Helix as my data source, I'll choose the dashboard. And now it would give me options of existing panels in the current dashboard, which is Instant Details. Is one of the panels. And now I'll click on Transform, go to Transform tab, go to Group By. I'll have to apply an aggregation on my instant ID. So I'll go and select distinct of count. And I would need a dimension. I'll choose department as a group by. Click on Open Visualization Suggestions. And I'll choose the pie chart. And give it a title as Total Incidents by Department. This is my first visualization using the existing panel. Now let's create another one. Again, instead of Helix, choose Dashboard, choose the existing panel, enable Transform, go to Group By, apply an aggregation on the instant ID, distinct of count. Probably this time you would need an impact, and Group By suggestions. Probably this time we'll select this and apply. Let's go back and give it a title. See, by impact. Yeah, apply, and let me resize them. In this way, you could create n number of visualizations, considering the panel as a foundation, much like a view or a semantic layer. The key advantages are the reusability of the existing query. There is a lot of performance improvement because we are sharing the same query results to have it visualized in different graphs. And finally, we just have one query to maintain. That's the main panel where we are building the visualizations on. Now let's move on to the row and repeat features. Let's go to the home page and access the pre-built dashboard in the interest of time. And this is my basic dashboard that doesn't have the row and repeat functionality yet applied. We shall see how this dashboard gets enhanced by applying the row and repeat functionality. So the first thing I do is add a new row and go to the settings of the row. Here I choose priority as a dimension that it has to get repeated rows. So as you could see, we have 4 different priorities: critical, high, low, and medium. So I have 4 rows created for all of them. If I choose just critical, there would be just 1 row. If I select all, then I'll have 4 rows. But this row title isn't really helping me figure out what's the data inside. So in order to make it more dynamic, we'll have to give a variable as a row title. So for the variable, we have to give dollar and priority. This will update the title to critical, high, low, and medium, which now makes it more enhanced. Now this can be considered as sections, typically in the reporting solutions. Okay, now each priority would have its own graph. This would really enhance the viewability of these dashboards. Now this is the row functionality. Now let's look into the repeat feature. And further, I'll expand the critical row and edit the panel. And here I have an option to repeat the graph for the particular variable that I'm going to choose. Now I'll select service as a repeat functionality and apply. Because my service have more values, it gets repeated. So let's choose a couple of them in this. Okay, I'll choose 3. So this is the repeat functionality. If you see, the titles have been changing dynamically. The reason being, I've make sure the title is again a variable, which makes it dynamic. So let me go back, save this, and now critical, high, low, and medium are my sections. If I go further, then the services are my breaks, where I could easily identify which service is having more impact, more number of critical incidents raised, and how many were closed, and the total number of incidents. So this is nicely bifurcated according to the service. The same graph that is giving visualizations for each dimension in a more granular way. So this is how you could enhance the very basic dashboard to a more viewable dashboard for the end user. The other advantage of this row functionality is these panels or rows and the panels would only get updated once you expand these rows. Unless you expand this, it will not hit the database and fetch the data. So that really helps in minimizing the number of transactions to your database. Only the ones that you expand are the ones that are fetching the data by hitting the database. You can save this choice so that next time you open this, you will have the same choice retained. Let me go back and re-access this. And at this stage, none of the queries are being hit to the database to fetch the data. Now if I expand low, and these 3 queries have run to fetch the data, which really helps in minimizing the load to the database. And this concludes our topics for the agenda today. So to summarize, we have learned how the user is configured out of the box and how could you tailor it according to your needs. We also covered few of the functions available in Helix dashboards that would help you develop complex dashboards. We've also covered few of the features and functionalities in Helix dashboards, starting with the data links and the reusability of the output of the panel data, and finally the row and repeat features. Here are a few references to the previous webinars that you could watch and the links for the BMC docs. Hope you have enjoyed this webinar and see you in the next one.